Okay, moment of truth. Alexa, take the top off. My dudes and dudettes, I'm going to show you guys how I got this to be automated with your smart speaker, so stick around. Hey team, I wanted to run through some things to show you guys what I acquired before I go and just do this install. So what's not pictured, but you'll see later, is I got a really big large piece of 2x4, although I think it's actually 10 foot long and it's more like a 6x10, but you'll see that in a minute. I will say that this control box, this wireless controller, the main computer brain of the winch, and then the hook, the winch hook, all of those things came with the winch. And I'll leave a link in the description below. What I like about this winch is that it's got a wireless remote, and that's going to really help incorporating my automation. And I'll tell you guys more about that automation here in a bit. But here's the physical control box. It's up and down, or in this case, in and out. But for me, it'll be up and down because I'm installing this in my ceiling. It's going to be my hardtop hoist for my Jeep Wrangler. Of course, this is the main control box, the brains of it. The hook, the winch itself. The winch, I think, is rated for 3,000 pounds or 6,000. I don't remember exactly, but of course, I'll leave a link in the description down below where I got it on Amazon. Then I got this. I think these are 10 feet, I believe, and this is going to go under my hardtop, and then they will hook in to the hook itself. And then I got these bolts from, I think, Lowe's. The next thing that I got was this converter, because this is meant for 12 volts. That's meant for a vehicle or an ATV. And this is for converting my voltage from the 120 volt. Lastly, I got an extension cord because up in the attic, there's only one outlet. And so I needed an extension cord in order to run from that outlet to my Miros smart switch. And then the Miros smart switch hooks up to the converter, and then the converter will hook up to the positive and negative of the brain of the winch, and then we're going to be in business. Now this Miros, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. I will leave a description, or I will leave a link in the description below. But this is a smart switch, and I've got a lot of stuff in my home that's automated, and it'll be on a smart switch. And the reason why is because if I connect this converter directly to the extension, well, then I always have to go to the attic in order to turn this converter off and on. And that's kind of a pain. What I'd much rather do is I would much rather say, hey, or hey, and then say something along the lines of turn on hardtop hoist or turn on winch or whatever keyword I can have whenever I'm using Amazon and Alexa, or whenever I'm using Alexa and Google. Lastly, once this is on, by me using that smart word or that smart phrase with the smart speakers, the converter will then turn on with the smart switch, and then at that point I can control everything from here, rather than having to run this down from the ceiling and having to deal with all that. So that being said, to turn this on, because right now you'll notice when I press it, nothing happens, but to turn it on, you press and hold the buttons down twice for about 5 seconds. The light turns on. Now things are ready to go. In, out. Or in my case, in is going to be up, and then out is going to be down. And that's going to have this guy coming through the ceiling. So how I'm going to have everything set up, which you'll see in a moment, there's going to be a very, very small hole in the ceiling for this thing to fit through. Okay, so I've gone ahead and hooked everything up, and this is what I do recommend whenever you get something, even if it's not this, you get something else that's electronic or has moving parts to it, you want to test it before you install it, because then you kind of wasted your time if you install it and then it doesn't work. So that being said, I've got the black wire that's coming from the control box for the winch, along with the red wire, the power wire, that's coming from the control box of the winch. I've got them hooked up here to our converter. Our converter is hooked up to my smart switch. So if we pretend for a second that I was to say, hey Google, turn on winch. You can hear the fan turns on. And now we'll test to make sure that the winch is working. winch is working. Also to note, this winch is color coded, so the blue wire goes to the blue terminal here, and then the yellow wire goes to the yellow color coded post on this side. Now that we know that our winch is working properly, I'm gonna disconnect everything. The next step that I'm doing, now that we've tested everything, is I'm going to measure. But first I need to line up my vehicle to make sure that it's gonna be where I normally would park at. And so you don't wanna get too OCD with it. So I parked it in here 2 times, made sure that I had enough clearance over here on this side, and I did the same for the front as well, making sure that I had enough clearance so that the garage can still shut without hitting the vehicle. Now what I'm gonna do, since those 2 yellow straps that I showed you guys earlier, one's gonna come in through here, and then the other side of that strap is gonna come up. So one strap is on the driver's side, one strap is on the passenger side. They're gonna come and they're gonna meet in the middle. So I wanna measure to see where the middle of my hardtop is located, and then go up with a laser and find that exact point up here in my ceiling. Then I'll be able to drill a hole. So that's what we're gonna do next. So now that I found a rough area of where the center of this section of the hardtop is located, I went ahead and marked it on the ceiling. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make a hole that's big enough that's going to just fit and just pass this loop through that hole. And it looks like 1 inch is just about right. So let's try that. So now we've got our 1 inch hole created. The next thing that we want to do is we want to grab all the stuff that's going to go in the attic, and we want to take it up to the attic. And as many trips as possible that it's going to take for you to be safe. Now, considering I'm not an octopus, I'm probably going to have to take some of these things up one at a time or put them in the bag. So let's go ahead and do that now. Keep in mind, you don't want to take everything up there, right? The straps you're going to keep down here, the wireless remote, the hook, in order to put the straps inside the hook, the control switch that I don't think I'll ever need. So I will put this, I'll put this in storage somewhere in case I can ever think of a use for it. But for now, as long as this thing is working fine and I'm able to replace the battery that's inside of it, I don't see a need to ever use this thing, because I don't want to run a whole nother hole in the ceiling, despite the fact that I realize my ceiling needs to be painted. And so it's not the prettiest thing, but you know, that being said, I don't want extra holes if I don't need them. So I'm not gonna need that, but I've got my bolts down here and I do need those up there. But I wanna measure to make sure I've got the right drill for the pilot hole. And so I believe I do. For the screws that I purchased, this is the correct size. Now, you'll probably get different screws, or maybe you'll think of a completely different way of how to install this. This is just how I'm doing, and I hope that this gives you guys, some ideas of how you can set these things up too. So I've got the right drill for my pilot hole. Next, I'm going to measure to make sure that I've got the right socket for the head of this thing. And we're pretty much in the home stretch at this point. Let's go get that piece of wood installed. So guys, we've got our headlight, we've got our plank that's going to distribute the weight across the rafters, or whatever that's called. That's the frame of the attic. We've got both of our drills, one for our pilot hole, the other one for our socket. We've got the brain for the winch. Brain's here for the winch is here. We've got our bolts that I bought at the hardware store, got our extension, and then we've got the converter that converts 120 volts down to 12 volts so that this thing can work. And then we've got our smart switch by Miros. Of course, you guys could use different ones. I just really recommend these guys. My whole house is essentially set up with these Miros switches. Now we're ready to install this board. Well, I've ran into a bit of a snag. I've got the board up here, the one that I purchased to distribute the weight. But the hole is just beyond the center beam that was installed whenever the home was built. And I'm 6'2", and that's a really tight space with all these nails coming in from the roofers. So I don't have a lot to work with, but we're gonna try it. I'm gonna measure the winch to see if, once I put this board on the other side of this middle beam here, where the hole's located, I'm gonna see if there's still enough space where it'll fit with the height that you can see here of the structure of the garage. So let's test that. But super tight space. Just want to give you guys a heads up, and you want to be careful because you don't want to have your head stuck by one of these nails. Then you got to go to the hospital and get your tetanus shot. Well, prepare to get dirty. But it is installed, and after a lot of measuring, we've got it in there. Let me see if I can't turn the flash on. There we go. Now I can turn the flash on. So she's installed, and now I've got it sitting nice and flush against here. So now I'm going to go ahead and hook things up, and we'll test her out. Hey guys, so I do want to talk about on the top of the board, I've got these nuts here, and then down here on the bottom of the board, I have the same thing. So you want to make sure that you've got both sides nice and secure, because there's going to be a lot of weight here, and you don't want to rely just on the threads that have been created in the wood. Just keep that in mind. So something to note, on this big 6x10, or I don't know, I know it's 10 feet long, and I think it's about 6 inches across. But you'll notice that I did not drill any of those screws that I had intentions on drilling. And the reason why is because this winch butts up, the end of the winch butts up against this piece of wood right here. So I don't see it going anywhere. And it'll evenly distribute the weight across here. So I'm not very worried, especially when this piece of wood that I'm currently sitting on is much thinner than what I bought over here, which is about 2 inches thick. So yeah, if this little bitty particle board, well, almost particle board, can hold my weight, that's going to definitely be able to hold the weight of the hardtop, which I think is about 98 to 108 pounds, somewhere around there. The control board for the winch is underneath that piece of wood, as you guys saw earlier. I had to go back downstairs to get my Phillips head screwdrivers. So this inverter's done. Next thing is just hooking up the smart plug. So I hit a bit of a snag. Got a 3-prong extension cord, and the only outlet that I have up here in the attic is a 2-prong. And to make matters worse, the only time that this outlet gets power is whenever that switch is flipped on. So, unfortunately, I don't feel like running another outlet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to always have that switch turned on. So this is always going to have power. And this bulb, I'm going to unscrew it just a little bit. I need power here. That way my smart switch will be able to communicate with Wi-Fi all the time. That way I can run my commands through Alexa or through Google and have this thing power the inverter. So now that we've got power going to the smart switch, let's just make sure that the converter is turning on. Yeah, and I can hear it. I don't know if you can, but I can hear the converter running. So now I'm going to go ahead and get this thing hooked up to my Miros app, make sure that they're connected to each other and working. I do want to make a note that if your Wi-Fi goes out, then you're not going to be able to control the smart switch. And then you're not going to be able to hoist your hardtop up. But if your Wi-Fi is out, it's possible that you don't have electricity either. So at that point, it kind of negates itself. But something to keep in mind, no Wi-Fi, no smart switch. No smart switch, the inverter doesn't work, and then the winch doesn't work. So you won't be able to use the winch to hoist up your hardtop. Something else to keep in mind, you want to make sure that your fan is not facing the ground. That way it gets proper ventilation, especially in the summertime. Lastly, you need to check with your homeowner's insurance. Every city may have, well, every state may have something different in regards to if your homeowner's insurance is going to cover things or not. Or, you know, different insurance companies may cover it, other insurance companies may not. So before you install a converter, you ought to check with your homeowner's insurance to make sure that this is going to be covered in case there's a fire. But that being said, this converter that I've got does have a fuse that's in line, so the fuse should pop before anything else happens. And then of course the home itself has a fuse as well. And the extension cord that I'm using is UL and all those other different certifications. It's got all the certifications as well as the 2-prong to 3-prong converter that I had to buy as well. So I've got the smart plug for the winch hooked up to the Miros app on my phone. And there's plenty of tutorials on how to do that. But really, I don't think you need to watch any of them because the Miros app walks you through the whole thing. But that being said, I want to show you guys how I'm able to make a routine for the winch. So here's the winch. I'm able to create a routine. And in this routine, I could say something like winch, and then when I say the weather is perfect, it's summertime. Let's take the top off. Anyway, you get the idea. So we've got some phrases here that we can use, and now we'll add an action. For this action, we'll go to Smart Home, and then with Smart Home, we'll go to the plugs, go to winch, turn the winch on. Next. So whenever I say these phrases, it'll turn the winch on. And it doesn't have to be these specific phrases. I could also say, hey, Alexa, turn the winch on, and it'll do that too. Alexa, is the winch on?
The winch is off.
Okay, so here we go with the routine that I set up. Alexa, let's take the top off. Okay, so turn the winch on. I'm gonna turn on the remote. Remote's on. Now let's see. Moment of truth. Love to see it. Okay, so this just gives a better idea at this point. What you don't want to do is you don't want to let that thing keep going, because then it's going to bust an absolute massive hole in there. So another idea that I had was, if this was painted, that hole that I cut, I would have made a little bit bigger. And what I could have done is attached the drywall that I cut out, I could have attached it to the eyelet, and then it would appear as if it's never been there until you turn it on, and it comes down. Then of course, you would see it. But if you were to bring it in all the way, and it had a piece of that drywall, it would look flush, and I think it would look pretty good at that point. So now that we finally got our winch installed, I'm going to show you guys how I've ran my straps and how I recommend you guys to do the same thing. So I've got one strap here, and I passed it through, making sure I don't go underneath the roll bar because I don't want to pick the whole Jeep up. I just want to pick the hardtop up. This strap is also ran through. It's just one strap here on the passenger side, one strap over there on the driver's side. Now, as you can tell, unfortunately, I had 8-foot straps that I purchased, and I need 10-foot. So for the sake of this video, I went ahead and ran another strap to give me that leverage that I need in order for this to work. So here's another shot showing how I've come in through here, past the roll bar, onto the other side. Same thing on the driver's side. So moment of truth. Went ahead and turned my remote on, so the remote is already on. Done deal. I should also mention before you do this that you're going to want to make sure that you undo all of these bolts. They are a T40. So you're going to want to get a T40. And what I also use, instead of having to manually do it by hand, I picked up one of these. I'll leave a link in the description below, since this thing is a lifesaver. It really saves a lot of time. So to me, it was worth it. But yeah, here we go. Hardtop's up. Hardtop's out of the way. Wobbling a little bit because it's my first time, so I haven't measured my straps out perfectly. So that's why when it came up, it kind of wobbled. But there we go. You don't need a second person anymore. I hope this helps some of you guys. And you don't have to use it just for a hardtop. You could use it to hoist other things. I know some people could probably use it to hoist up an engine if you guys are doing engine replacements. So now that we've got that out of the way, I do want to interject here and talk about home automation, something that I'm really interested in and what I've kind of done a little bit here. So right now the winch is turned on, and as you guys know previously in this video, that I've got an inverter. The thing is I don't want that inverter to turn on, or I don't want the inverter to have power constantly. So as you guys know, I hooked it up to a smart switch, but here's where that smart switch comes in handy. Alexa, is the winch on?
The winch is on.
Right. Alexa, turn the winch off. So the winch is off, and we'll verify that. Press and hold this. Now we've got that out. Let's hit the out button. Nothing happens, right? Because of course the winch doesn't have power, which means there's no power to the inverter. And I sleep a little bit better knowing that it's less chance of the house catching on fire. Now, the inverter is UL certified and ROSC or ROC, whatever the other one is. It's got a bunch of certifications on there. That being said, I still don't want it to be on all the time. So what I like to do with the home automations is whenever I say, hey, Alexa, good night, or hey, Google, good night, whatever, it runs a whole thing of automations. And one of those automations is to make sure that the winch is turned off. But let's pretend that I want to take the hardtop off right now. So let's go ahead and run the automation with one of the smart phrases that I set up. Alexa, it's summertime. So now the winch has power. We can verify that. So I hope that this gives you guys some ideas on how to do some home automation. Of course, you guys don't have to follow my steps. Make it your own. You know, I just hope that this provides some type of insight on some of the different things that you can do around your home with your vehicle, or if you want to use the hoist for other things. Maybe you've got some things that you need to lift up around the garage. Maybe you want to paint some stuff. This hardtop hoist is a lifesaver. I did not realize how bad I needed a hardtop hoist. Alexa, turn on the garage. Leans forward just a little bit, so I need to adjust my straps. Yeah, so much better.